and compassion for these immigrants. The good book. The good book tells us in Ecclesiastes, the 3rd chapter, the very first verse, to everything there's a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. Ecclesiastes 3:1. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Alderman says there's a time, there's a season, and a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to embrace and a time to refrain. Check that out in Ecclesiastes. This is not the time to embrace illegal immigrants in this city and neglect the citizens of this city. It's time for the mayor and the aldermen to refrain from embracing this losing cause. Once again, I do understand that Mayor Brandon Johnson did inherit this mess. This is not of his own making, but he got to distance himself from it and take a stand for what the citizens want and send these immigrants back on that same bus that they're being shipped up here. For believe you me, that there are hidden hands pulling the strings behind the scenes.
For months, NBC5 Investigates has been asking city agencies for copies of financial records to better understand where the money has flowed to care for migrants. While the city continues to withhold many of the records we've requested, we did obtain contracts and a spreadsheet showing since October the city has spent at least $83 million on this crisis. The bulk of that money, more than $56 million, went to Favorite Staffing, a Kansas-based company whose employees work at the shelters. In response to our requests, the city has so far provided just 2 invoices showing how much Favorite staffers are being paid. This invoice from the now closed shelter at Truman College shows a facility manager made $14,000 in 1 week. At this High Ridge YMCA shelter, an invoice shows a nurse earned more than $20,000 for a week's worth of work. That same week, the shelter's manager's invoice billed for more than $14,000. These invoices did account for overtime.
And the good book tells us in 1 Timothy 5:8, if a man does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his own house, he is worse than an infidel. If a man does not, if a leader, if the mayor, if the city council does not provide for the citizens, which represents their house, their community, he is worse than an infidel. How you going to go out and take money, food off the tables of taxpayers for goods and services to someone that's not even supposed to be here in this country? I don't apologize for telling the truth. I'm sorry. I don't care who disagree and you're entitled to your opinion. I don't have anything against the immigrants. I don't have anything against the immigrants whatsoever. But I got a problem that they're in this city, coming into our communities and communities around this city, and tax dollars is taking care of them when there's needs and concerns of people over this city. And I'm tired of folks getting up there trying to protect the mayor and say, oh, he's going to do something. Give him time. We go get it. No. He's going to be a one-term mayor. Mark my word. Because you got people in all 50 wards. You got people in white communities, black communities, in Chinatown, and in Hispanic communities that do not want these immigrants coming into their community.
At Sheldon Heights Church of Christ, an open dialogue on the migrant crisis hosted by Alderman Ronnie Mosley was packed inside and out.
First of all, they definitely chose this venue for a reason. They chose a small venue so that they could discourage the community from being able to show up.
With fall and winter fast approaching, Mayor Brandon Johnson is looking to move migrants from police stations into what the city is calling winterized base camps.
This is essentially like a Band-Aid to a gunshot wound. You are putting a Band-Aid on a huge...
And do not want our city spending $300 million of tax dollars to feed, clothes, and house these immigrants when there's needs and concerns that need to be addressed in this city.
But we got a black mayor that said he was going to take care of black folks.
He's not doing his job.
It's speaking for itself, right? And then what makes it bad, he got white folks mad at him too. White folks ain't happy. We can't win. We can't win.
And then something else, but we're not really related. We were born born here. They get housing before we do. They get everything before we do. But
I assure you, if I had thoughts of running for mayor, I would start planning my campaign right now. And I would start going to all 50 wards and tell them that the first thing I would do when elected mayor in the next go round is I would rescind that sanctuary city status that the city of Chicago has. And I will not spend any money, taxpayers' dollars. Then we're lied to and say we go seek out private funding. You need to get that private funding to go into the community to feed the homeless in our community, to reopen the mental health centers in the city of Chicago. You need to deal with the abandoned buildings, boarded up houses in our communities. That's what you need to do with that $300 million. And don't tell me that's federal funds, so it has to be used for the immigrants. These are tax dollars that the city council is voting on to spend to house clothes migrants that are not legally in this country. Now, the fact of the matter is these migrants are being bused to Chicago because Chicago, the city of Chicago, has declared itself a sanctuary city by executive order going back to 1985 by the late Mayor Harold Washington, which means it prohibits the city and the Chicago Police Department from enforcing federal immigration laws and working with ICE to deport illegals. And the former Mayor Lightfoot reaffirmed on her watch as mayor that Chicago was a sanctuary city, saying all was welcome to come to the city. Now for the record, quote, unquote, these democratic cities, which these immigrants are being bused into, they tell you that the Republicans are busing them into the black cities, the urban cities, California, New York, Chicago. They're busing them in here because these are democratic cities, and they declared themselves as sanctuary cities for political gain. Once again, Chicago, New York, California, and these cities that Texas governor are busing these immigrants into are democratic cities because they declared themselves as sanctuary cities for political gain, to get votes from the Hispanic community. And now it has backfired on them because they did not plan or see the day when they would get flooded and overwhelmed with migrants coming in here. And it has gotten out of hand. That's why you have the city being flooded with over 13,000 immigrants. Not because Chicago is having a Democratic Party come here. Not because the governor is trying to make Chicago look bad. No, Chicago declared itself a sanctuary city, which means you open game for anybody that's illegal to come in here. And technically, by law, you can't move them out of here. This is why Chicago is flooded with over 13,000 immigrants who are here, with thousands and thousands more on the way, overwhelming our communities and depleting the city budget to the tune of over $300 million by the end of this year alone. Not to mention the funds that will be required for the next fiscal year to house these migrants. And they have no clue nor plan on how to solve this crisis.
We have to stop playing for the moment and just addressing busload by busload and begin making preparations not only in our city but in this state to address the fact that we can very easily see upwards of 50,000 migrant asylum seekers sent to Chicago and Illinois in the next year.
Now let me tell you how the aldermen can stop this right now. No ifs, ands, and buts about it. I want you to listen. I want you to listen very clearly. Here's how the aldermen can stop this migrants coming to the city right now, with no ifs, ands, and buts about it. Call your aldermen and tell them if they vote to approve any more funding for these migrants, you will vote them out of office in the next election. Once again, here's how you stop it. The city has a $16 billion budget. Call your aldermen, because in the next year that budget going to go up to $18 billion because they're going to raise the taxes on you to pay for these immigrants that's coming in here. Call your aldermen and tell them if they vote to approve any more funding on these migrants, you will vote them out of office. Or matter of fact, tell them you will run against them personally in the next election. Tell them to hold up the funding, hold up the budget. Do not approve any more funding. That's how you stop this. They cannot pay to house these immigrants. They cannot pay to feed them. They cannot pay to clothe them. They cannot pay to transport them if the aldermen do not approve the money to pay for it. And if the city spend the money to do it without the alderman's approval, somebody's going to jail because that's illegal. If the funds ain't approved, they can't spend it. Call the mayor. Call the mayor's office and tell him to rescind Chicago sanctuary city status and send them back. Yeah, that's all he got to do is the same way that Harold Washington and Mayor Lightfoot reinforced that this was the sanctuary city. All he has to do is sign a proclamation saying that he rescinds Chicago as a sanctuary city. And then Governor Abbott, the governor from Florida, or nobody else can legally send immigrants to the city of Chicago if it is not deemed a sanctuary city. But because it's a sanctuary city, Chicago's free game. Your tax dollars is free game to take care to fund them.
It's been nearly 2 weeks since the mayor first revealed his plans for tent cities for migrants. Since then, his office hasn't released much in the way of detail. But we found a $29 million contract quietly signed last week that offers new details about living conditions and some of the benefits migrants will be offered.
My plan is to move with expediency families out of police stations into housing and shelter that's more suitable.
When they say they have no money. Oh, that's so cruel. Coach, I used to like you, but that's so cruel. You just cold-blooded, Coach, to say something like that. Well, we didn't find when Mayor Daley was in office, and you had homeless people forced out of sleeping in the airport in the city of Chicago. And they tried to stop the homeless people from sleeping under the bridges and downtown and riding the CTA to keep warm in the wintertime. We didn't find that cruel. We didn't say we got to find money to house these homeless. We need $300 million. We need to put up tents in every ward.
The mayor's office confirming tonight that the type of giant framed tents that are currently being used to house migrants in New York City are similar to what Chicago is looking to do to ease the migrant housing crisis here. The mayor and his team briefing members of the city council about the limited details of the plan this afternoon, saying each tent would house 500 to 1,000 people. They asked for help finding 2-acre or larger sites in every ward where tents could possibly be placed.
In all 50 wards to accommodate the homeless. We didn't say when we say we got 60,000 homeless in this city. It has not been said that we go rent out hotels to house these homeless. And don't tell me when I listen to VOA, well, these people have adapted to being on the streets and they got mental conditions. So they will not stay in one place. Open back up the mental health centers so they will have somewhere to go for their mental conditions. Feed them. In that community meeting, we had the alderman, the commander church that the meeting was in, saying that they feed the homeless. And I drive through my community in the 21st Ward, and I see homeless people walking their shopping carts down the street, going to the church to stand in line, to wait to be given food to take back to cook, standing in line when it's cold and when it's raining, not let into the churches to sit down and get warm and come. Standing in line, waiting for the church to open the doors to feed them and give them food. And we're spending over $300 million of taxpayers' dollars
WGN Investigates reviewed this contract the city of Chicago signed last week with a company called Garda World. It sets standards for the tents. They must be able to house 250 to 1,400 people. The company must also provide migrants with bedding, laundry, showers, 3 meals a day, and security.
To feed immigrants, to house and clothe them, to put up tents where they got washers and dryers and a rec center.